No wonder Frost was out to get me the whole year. Hello, YouTube. Welcome back to another week of VCT Pacific content. But VCT Pacific just wrapped up, so we are done with VCT Pacific for 2024. I know, middle of July, we're done with it. But now it's time to look back at the whole year already. I know, crazy. But we're going to look back at the whole year, and we're going to rank how we think every team looked by the very end. We will compare that to how things looked, you know, leading up to this and see how big things have changed. So without further ado, let's jump right in. Okay, so for this week, we're not going to compare it to our latest video, which was going into playoffs, but we're actually going to compare it to where we rated every team going into Stage 2. That was after a couple crazy roster changes. We had just seen Gen G lift the trophy in Master Shanghai, etc. Just because, obviously, for teams who didn't play in playoffs, there shouldn't be too big of a change. There might be one or two, but there shouldn't be too big of a change, so I thought it'd be nice to just kind of compare to how things looked prior. Gosh darn it, Gen G's at the top. Listen, 5 back-to-back grand finals. Which, I still can't believe it. 5 back-to-back grand finals. How do you make 5 back-to-back grand finals at any level? That's so crazy to me. That's so crazy to me. Listen, it's very clear that a couple of their comps, I think, you know, should be changed. I would say that they're outdated a bit. I think they're still, you know, you can still maneuver them, and Gen G's very good at that. But even with that, it just goes to show that the comfort they have with those and how they adapt to their opponents, etc., is just too strong. They're the undeniable, absolute emperors of Pacific. There's not much more to say to that. Obviously, we can break down like what they're good about, but guess what? We're going to do that in our upcoming series for champs, so you can stay tuned for that one. But I don't think anyone's going to argue with this one. Next up, I'm going to do it. Not just because they finished second, but because now I have faith again, which is crazy. It took a whole year. And this, listen, this is a team where I will take the fan criticism to say people have called me a DRX hater all since last year. And I kind of was. It was out of love, but I kind of was, right? I was calling for big changes. I wasn't going to dare say what I thought the big changes specifically should be because I thought any of them would hurt, but I thought they needed to basically rip off the Band-Aid, start bleeding again, and then heal up. Now, the crazy thing is they healed way faster, and that's why I can confidently rank them second. They look way better way sooner than I thought. I thought they could still make champs, but I thought they would be like, oh, like making champs, congrats, like that's great. I did not think that they would confidently make it to the lower finals. I did not think that they would win the lower finals by any means, and I definitely did not think that they would have it in them to go for a reverse sweep. I think the draft actually worked out for them to go for the reverse sweep. I think they were very cognizant of the fact that they had a pretty strong later half of a BO5. But obviously, you still had to get there. You still had to win one of the first 3 maps, and they just barely did that. And how poetic is it that Maka was the one who did it? I would say that the weaknesses for DRX still are that you're still not. Basically, the strength you have in your prep is still way stronger than the strength you have in your mid routing. I'm not going to say that the mid routing is bad, because if it was bad, then they wouldn't actually push Gen G to the end. No matter how well you prep for Gen G, one of their biggest strengths is how well they mid round and how well they adapt. There is a gap between the prep they have and then how they're adjusting and how they're holding on to things. And I do think there is a bit of a mental block as well still to become like a champion level. They could on any given day, but it's one of those things where, well, on any given day they could win, whereas Gen G, it's like, well, almost on every day they should be winning. So I listen, I'm just happy for DRX. I'm happy for Buzz. I'm happy for Mako. Let's say they bomb out of groups, which DRX never technically does, but let's say they do. I still don't think it's down in the dumps for them, right? I think they already proved themselves enough. I think they already proved their growth enough, but I mean, we'll see, but I am kind of hopeful. I'm kind of excited for DRX. And then, it's Paper X. I mean, listen, Paper X have some very, very clear weaknesses, aka map pool and agent pool, which is funny to say because they have 2 of the most flexible players that we have, or I guess now starting to become 3 with something starting to branch out more and more, but it's funny to say that because then Jing's agent pool kind of counteracts all of that. So they have some glaring weaknesses, but obviously their individuals are still crazy. Something is insane. Like the way that you could tell by the end of the Paper X DRX lower finals that the game plan was something go kill, and they activated that, and it looked like it was possible. Like just Just run that through your brain, okay? That's the power that some of these players have on Paper Rex. But Forsaken, very, very flexible. Devi, sturdy and flexible. I'm glad that this year Devi has kind of been consistently in the spotlight. In the past, I think it was always like coming into Champions, everyone's like, oh yeah, and like you can't forget about Devi, like he's one of the best players on Paper X. But now it's like he's always at the top of the conversation, probably thanks to Pulchan, so shout out to him. But it's very hard to rate Paper X lower than third. It doesn't matter if they have glaring weaknesses. If you're strong enough to still battle through it, then you're strong enough to battle through it. But I hope, I don't know if it's enough time, but I hope that the map and agent pool has evolved for champs. Next up, listen, we have to. Talon is fourth. They're going to champs. Not only are they going to champs, but Primi comes in. They haven't had much practice. They've talked about that pretty publicly. He still looks really solid. At an individual level, he definitely looks solid. I think he looked just solid enough for them to get to champs at a team level, but now they've had some more time. And also, I'm actually a big fan of Talon's like ideas. I've said this a lot. It's just that I don't know if I feel comfortable with how consistently they're executing it cleanly. And they talk openly about that being something that holds them back. But they also still have a lot of ideas where they're always just getting a bit more throughout the year if you look back, right? So I think maybe I've sometimes been harsher on them just because I've had higher hopes, maybe because I like their ideas. But overall, I think they're a solid fourth. Now, the whole argument between Talon, Team Secret, and RRQ, like they're all still in a very relatively similar tier. And I think, listen, I think Team Secret looked real strong going into playoffs. I think they looked pretty strong in playoffs, but that Abyss, man, I mean, you picked it. And like you have a godlike Sova, and it just did not look good. And there were clearly some nerves and pressure problems. And that's unfortunate because that always seems to be the case. But listen, Wild Oreo, great pickup, etc. And I hate to cop out like this, but we're going to do it. The USBs are back just because, chat. Listen, you're going to hear me out. Listen. You're going to hear me out. It's not me just trying to throw RRQ a bone, okay? First of all, I firmly believe that if it wasn't Gen G, RRQ would have made it. But I'm not saying that's an excuse. I think Talon deserves it. I think they played to a level where they should be at champs. I'm not saying RRQ should have been there over Talon. I just think that RRQ, what they showed us against Gen G was pretty darn good. I think it was. I think it made it tough for Gen G. But they have slightly different problems, in my opinion. I think RRQ, the fundamentals still falter a bit, or maybe it's just not deep enough. Maybe that obviously it's hard to presume because I'm not in their comms or their scrims. Whereas Team Secret, I think the fundamentals and overall, like Jesse Vash has a very, very solid flow chart of how to mid round, etc., etc. That's all good, but then the pressure, etc. Is holding you back. And I think the whole narrative of they're not like creative enough, etc., I think that's gone in stage 2. I think when Dummy said he wanted to, his main goal joining this team was to add more layers, I think he was actually very successful in that so far. So I'm going to give them that. But the pressure, etc., and then RQ, I think they cook, but then the glue to hold it together isn't as strong or like as deep. So I think they sometimes devolve into individually they have ideas of how to overcome a hard portion of the game, and that's not all lined up. That's how I see it from the outside. So both of them have these like intangible factors that are holding them back a little bit. Yeah, but I'm pretty hopeful for RQ. They're looking for an assistant coach as well, so clearly they want to improve even more. They feel that they were close, you know. So hopefully we can rely on that. Yes, the no initiator on bind was kind of crazy, but here's the thing. I don't think it was a bad comp for that specific match. I really don't think so, but I do think it was just not piloted well enough for Gen G. I really think so. It's very easy to look back at this and be like, well, no initiator, of course, but it's like Is it a Hail Mary comp? Kind of. But did it have logic behind it? Yes, I think it did. I think it did. Okay. Out of the remaining teams, listen, I actually don't remember exactly how I rated these before playoffs, but I think T1's going to sit here. You know, I think 7th is exactly where they ended up, right? Snacks joins. He's a little bit rejuvenated. He doesn't have the pressure of being the IGL, whether he's a big part of the comms or not. It doesn't matter. He's looking good. I think that helps a lot. They're seemingly sorting out the role issues a bit, although I would say T1 also suffering a little bit from flexibility, where it's like Saya has to be playing an opping agent, right? But I like it. I like that they're trying to put Izu more as the main duelist. I think that's where he shines. Obviously, he's comfortable with it. Maybe down the road he can flex, but I think that's good. But that consistency just wasn't there. I'm very hopeful for them in the future. Like, I think they could rise back up going into next year, like depending on what they brush up on or what changes they make, whatever it might be. But at the end of the stage, do I think like, I'm not disappointed. I'm not sad that they didn't make it champions. I don't think they were in a form to make champions. The rest of the teams are kind of tough because of, what situations they were going through, etc. But I think this shouldn't be different from how I had them ranked, but we're just going to kind of go through this. Guy, I think Bleed showed their peak by the end when they're in their comfort zone. Now, the only argument I'll take against Bleed is like, well, anyone can play well when they're comfortable and they have nothing to lose. Fair. Totally fair. But it's also like kind of unfair because it's like, well, that was the very end of the whole year. So if another season came, now having gotten some games without anything to lose, would they come back stronger? I mean, I'm going to be hopeful. I think Darian on the duelist and him getting warmed up to it again has worked out very nicely for them. I still rate Crazy Guys IGLing pretty decently. Like, I don't think it's especially now that we're starting to see really, really good IGLs shine through in every region. So I'm not going to say that Bleeds, Crazy Guys like at the top, but I think it's pretty reliable. Vretla was getting more and more consistent. Obviously, Scary now playing better once he doesn't have to IGL anymore, etc. The biggest problem with Bleed is that they had to play so basic for most of the year, right? With all these roster changes and language barriers, etc. So it's tough. But I think if we had another week of matches, I think Bleed should be able to take all the teams below them. That brings me to GE, where whoever's watching this, if you followed me for the whole year, you know that any chance I got, I was trying to get hopeful for GE again, and not just to throw them a bone. I actually saw things that I really liked from GE, right? Like during stage 1, I thought they had some really good prep and reads, and it was just one of those things where it was like, oh, this is like clearly an execution problem. The idea, because the setup is there, like the positioning is just there, and like either they're not hitting their shots or the lineup is wrong or whatever, and it's rough. Sadly, that's kind of the end of the story. I think by the end of it, G was like, okay, hey, you showed that a couple of you guys were still pretty solid. I think Lightning Fast overall still ended the year on a pretty solid note overall. I don't think as high as the highs he had in stage 1, but still very strong. I think Povey is fine. But I think for Povey, it's much more about like, how much more is coachable is he down the road, etc., which obviously I don't know. I can't speak to that. And I think Blaze King started to get into the rhythm of playing Sentinel again and Lurk, like being a bit more proactive on the Lurk. Like Blaze King's always been a very good anchor type of player, but especially in the current meta, in Pacific, you had to be very proactive if you were lurking, right? You couldn't just wait until, especially because your team was lacking firepower, you couldn't always rely on the rest of your teammates to just break through a site. And then for you to just be like, all right, I'll like catch them off on the rotates. Like that's just not how you play Valorant anymore. So I think he caught on to that, as the stage went on. Now, ZETA and DFM, listen, they could be swamped and I wouldn't have a problem with it. But I think I said this, if I remember correctly, I think I said this in the last video as well, if I did rank them the same way. Now I'm starting to question my memory. But they both have glaring issues, but at the very least, ZETA, similar to Bleed, once they had nothing to lose, they were playing as a team. They finally made that role swap. Huron, back on the Sentinel where he's more comfortable. He started to get proactive once he was on Sentinel. He started to take confident fights once he was on Sentinel. And it was all better. And so to me, the overall sum of the parts was stronger for ZETA than DFM. May's amazing, but it's just May. Right? I mean, Anthem was looking better overall in stage 2. But as Munchkin said, you can't really use the IGLing excuse anymore if you want to be at the top. And then, you know, Medusa, I would say, is still a bit up and down. Like, I think his peaks were probably higher, but his, you know, the frequency of his lows didn't exactly disappear enough for me to rate him as a strong, reliable player on DFM. To me, having a solo player isn't good enough anymore in the current landscape of VCT, and I think the overall value that holds is just much less than it used to be. I just think that's what it is. To me, that's why I'm ranking DFM below ZETA. But again, it's not enough. And again, so much of it is still like set up May. And I just don't think that you can play Valorant like that anymore. It's more so that you need to have a player like May so that once all your plans run out, he can just say, I'm winning the round, right? But if your whole game plan is May's our strongest player, so let's all our game plans revolve around setting kills up for May. Now, if he doesn't get kills, you lose. You know what I mean? Now, if he doesn't get kills, you lose. So you need to make your X factor an additional win condition, not your only win condition. And to me, DFM by the end, it still felt like, other than that one T1 Ascent game, that May was their only win condition. And I will rate ZETA division with Hero Run on Sentinel higher than DFM. That is it. That's my final power rankings. I'm sorry I copped out with this at the very end with Team Secret and RRQ. It's just tough for me. I actually think I want to rate RRQ higher. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. Nope. We're not going to cop out. I'm going to do it. RRQ's higher. And here's why. Because I legitimately do think that the ideas they had were very good against Shenji. Obviously, was it lacking? Yes, because it didn't win, but I think so. And I'm not saying Talon's like a weak team to play, but I think Team Secret like, listen, I was so disappointed in Team Secret's Abyss. I'm just going to say it. I was so excited. Team Secret was one of the teams I was excited to watch in Abyss, and then I was sorely disappointed. So I'm going to rate RQ higher. I'm just going to do it. This is how we're wrapping up the year. After 2024 VCT Pacific, this is how I view the teams. Obviously, for the 4 teams going to Champions, anything could happen, and that could change my viewpoints. And that's fine. I hope they all do really well. I actually think they all have some pretty sick shots at making it deeper into the tournament. Even Talon, I think Talon. I'm gonna eventually we'll do a pick'ems for Champions, and I'm just gonna say this. I'm gonna predict Talon to get out of groups. But we'll see exactly what the bracket is that I predict. But looking back at the beginning of Season 2 after Masters Shanghai, so Genji, you know, a little faltering with Paper X looking a bit strong coming back from Shanghai, but they reclaimed their position very well. You know, DRX eventually getting above PRX. I am surprised that DRX looks stronger now than Paper X, or that I rate them higher, but I think it's justified with how fast their growth has been with Mako IGLing. Talon, they end up in 4th, right where we thought. You know, RQ. Team Secret, I rated giga low. I was not familiar with Wild Oreo's game. I mean, that's like the biggest reason, because I was pretty hopeful for 2G, and also Coach Dummy. So I owe both of them an apology. So that's on me. And then otherwise, I mean, I think Bleed. This is much more Bleed impressing me a bit more once the pressure was gone, rather than GE necessarily dropping. So, and then ZETA dropped a lot, but I mean, I don't know. Listen, we could do a whole separate video about ZETA Division. Now, before we sign off, because this is all we have today, we're going to just check out something a little fun. And so, for those who have been following my channel for a while, this was done before any VCT Pacific matches happened. All right, I did these power rankings not even at the very end of the offseason. This was, I believe this was before the what was it, Predator League, whatever the event was that Team Secret played in. But listen, we hadn't seen a single game of RQ. I had said that this was pure hopium and copium. And obviously, listen, I mean, I just think it's funny. I was looking back at this, and I do think it's funny. Boy, was I hopeful about this team. And my God, I owe Talon an apology. No wonder Frost was out to get me the whole year. The one apology I will give is I wasn't familiar with Governor's game and maybe Ban's flexibility. So I'll give my apology for that. But, and I guess, I mean, I wasn't familiar with Frost games, but that wasn't the big reason why I ranked them low. But, okay, like, that's my excuse. That's my excuse. Those are the apologies I'll give. I mean, listen, T1, there were exciting moments for T1 during the offseason. But the reason I wanted to showcase this was not just to laugh at myself, but also it just goes to show, listen, it's really hard. It's really hard to tell because offseason, so many things could change. The game could change, the chemistry, how fast. I think the biggest thing I'm learning from this is that a lot of teams grew a lot faster. I think a lot of teams improved a lot faster than I expected. Surprisingly, I think DRX was a pretty fair position. Even not considering, you know, Stacks leaving in the middle. I actually have no problem with DRX at 5th because I think second for them, like this is beyond my wildest imaginations, quite frankly, with how they finished. It's funny that I predicted Secret here with just the NDG change, and it ended up actually being relatively accurate, but with Wild Oreo and 2GE joining. Bleed actually eventually redeemed themselves a little bit, but also Gen G. I didn't even realize I had Gen G at 8th. Oh my God. I will just say, this one I do owe a severe apology to Gen G, but I don't know if I said this in the video, but I was not sure if they would gel. And to me, this was a bunch of players that were always living in DRX's shadow, and if you couldn't gel, then you were just going to get overshadowed again. That was my excuse, but I owe an apology, especially to the coaching staff, but also, I think probably the biggest apology I owe is like, actually, it's all of them. It's all of them. I probably had equal doubt for all of them. So that's me. That's me. The Gen G one was probably unfair. Honestly, like maybe 5th or 6th, I wouldn't have felt I needed to apologize. Funny how the turn's stable. So this was before Solo joined, but quite frank, or it might have been after actually, because I have no problem admitting this. I actually rated Gen G lower once Solo joined because I was personally unhappy with how he commandeered the old D plus Kia roster. So that's my bad, Solo. Isn't it good fun? I can't wait to make the same mistakes again in the offseason later this year, chat. I can't wait. Listen, I have no problem admitting that I was wrong with these. I'm very happy that some of the, especially like Talon, I'm very happy that they've completely upset me. I am disappointed in T1, but hopefully now they're going in a better direction. And overall, what an exciting year of Pacific. Well, that's going to be it for today's video. This is all we have for today. Obviously, no more matches for VCT Pacific. Champs is coming up. We will be doing a Champions Seoul pick'ems and power ranking video and maybe top 10 player video, maybe all in one. But that will come out like just a couple days right before the opening matches. Want to spend some more time reviewing as many VODs as I can. And then, of course, as I said in my other video, we'll be putting out a content series that's kind of like tracking all the Pacific teams and their upcoming opponents. So look forward to that. But let me know. Feel free. Let me know. Which team do you think I rated the worst before the entire year started? Let me know down in the comments below. And of course, if you enjoyed it, please subscribe to the channel. And I'll see you guys next time.